Good morning. We thought we'd start with the sound of the bells from our partner church in Fel Rocos, since that is recorded sound that we don't need a copyright to play. So hope you've enjoyed that start to our service. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Spokane's virtual service for the time being, where we still join together to create a nourishing liberal religious home and to champion justice, diversity, and environmental stewardship in our wider world. Or you can say it with me if you want, to create community, find meaning, and work for justice. Welcome to one and all. As always, thank you for all that you bring with you this morning, all that you are, all your unique beliefs and background and lifestyle and experiences. That's all still very welcome here, even though you're not physically present in our building this morning. Your spirit is with us in the ability to communicate in the way that we are. So welcome to one and all, to those who are part of our congregation as usual, and those who might even be joining us for the first time. You're equally is appreciated and welcome. So thank you all for being here. I want to begin again by reminding you that for the next few weeks, until we get the all clear, we will not be holding services here on our premises. But we will be having either a weekly amended service like we're having this morning, and when I'm scheduled to be away, we'll have a recommended pre-recorded service from our archive that you can watch, which of course you're always welcome to watch any of those anyway. You can find them on our church website. I did want to address a couple things. One, we really can't have music for a couple of reasons. We do have a license to play copyrighted materials, but they cannot be original performances. In other words, we can't do recordings. And we're not asking musicians to come into our space at this time for obvious reasons. So I apologize for not having music. I know how important it is to our services, but it's just not something that we can accommodate right now. Although I'm open to creative ideas. And I've also had a couple of folks let me know that it's hard for them to see the emptiness of the room, seeing me here by myself in a big empty room and nobody sitting in it, and I totally get that. It is strange, believe me. But I'm also fortunate to have had a television background and don't have any problem connecting with you behind that little lens that I'm looking at, because I know you're there. And what I try to do is look at the emptiness as something besides emptiness and coldness, but really as a symbol of the solidarity we all have right now in our need to be isolated physically from one another. This is a symbol of the pain that we're sharing, the difficulty that we're sharing right now as a community. And I think it's something very important to look at in that lens. It also, when I look at the emptiness, I see openness rather than emptiness. I see a symbol of our open minds and our open hearts. I see a symbol of our inclusivity. And I also see a place that is meant for our homecoming. And I know that someday soon we're going to have a homecoming. And I think when we do that, we need to celebrate it as a homecoming. So right now, I'm going to look at all of these empty chairs as each one of yours invitations to everyone else in the community to come back together when the time is right, to be together, to celebrate our homecoming in this very special place that we have. So I'm so glad, and I'm glad that we also have the unique opportunity to stream live services. It's not something a lot of churches can do. They're trying to find clever ways to stay connected on Sundays, and this is one way that we're very fortunate to be able to do it. I want to thank Todd for being back there in the booth, and we are not only staying 6 feet apart, we're staying 60 feet apart. So that is a good idea. So we're the only two. And he has a glass barrier. And he has a cross up too. So, but thank you very much for being here. We appreciate it. Today was also to be the official start of our generosity kickoff, our annual stewardship campaign. As you know, I think we're going to want to hold off on that as well until things normalize a bit and we're able to actually be together for that kind of celebration. But I do want to thank the generosity team, as always, for all the great work they've done promoting this year's generosity campaign, and also want to thank all of you for your continued support for this congregation that you love. I know that is something that is meaningful and appreciated by all of us, because we couldn't be here if it weren't for that continued support. So thank you for your continued generosity in giving to our congregation. Now I'm going to actually have a virtual greeting of one another. How are we going to do that? Pretty simple. I'm going to give you a couple of extra minutes this morning, and I'm going to ask you if you're able to go to your computer, get your cell phone out, whatever it is, and send an email or a text to somebody in the church, letting them know that you're thinking about them. And just it doesn't have to be anything lengthy, just a word or two, but it's a way for us to greet one another. And if you are joining us for the first time and you don't know anybody in the church, send something to another friend. But let's take an opportunity here for just a couple of minutes to let somebody you love know that from our church or otherwise know that you're thinking about them this morning. Please. Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. And I got a couple of texts myself, so thank you all for thinking of me as well this morning. It's interesting that, our clock is still working, but the minute hand isn't spinning. And that's how I usually keep up with the passage of time when I'm sitting there. So I can't do that this morning. But I'm glad that it's at least keeping me on track so I don't go on too long later on. We are going to move forward by now. I sort of pre-lit our chalice, so I cheated a little bit for our chalice lighting. But Todd's going to focus on our chalice as I recite our ritual words here. That the chalice is the symbol of our unity and our solidarity, of our openness and our inclusion, of our community and our individual uniqueness. May this small flame be our offering of warmth to those who are cold and alone, and a light to those in darkness. May it be a flame that ignites justice in our world, and a beacon of hope to those in need, and may it reflect at least a spark of truth wherever truth has been lost, and cast a healthy shadow of doubt wherever it's been found. We're also going to jump right into our candles of care this morning. And I did not light our candles. Ask you to, again, imagine a virtual candle, or we might consider these reflections of care at this time. Or if you have a tea light or a small light at home you'd want to light at this time, I invite you to do that as well. And I want to begin with a really very difficult candle of care to let you know about our dear church member, Mary Ann Winifred, and her daughters, Katie and Larissa. Their father, Mary Ann's ex-husband, died on Thursday from the coronavirus. He died in Spain, where he's been living for a few years. I know this came as quite a shock, of course, to all of them, and it's been hard not to be able to be physically present for them at this time. But I hope that all of you will just really wrap them in your love and in your hearts right now, because that's a big loss. It's a big loss. I know that just this week we've had two members of our extended family have been laid off from their jobs, and I know that others are being laid off as well. So this is something that's going to be impacting all of us in different ways for probably some time to come. And I light a candle for everybody who's suffering in addition to the isolation we're all feeling, but just suffering some of the economic and really life-changing, life-altering repercussions from this. It's a sad time, and let's take a few moments to reflect upon others that you might be thinking of at this time. Those named aloud and those embraced in our silence, and all those who are suffering in our world at this hour, we hold in our community with compassion. Now, last week I invited you to grab a pencil and paper or pen and paper to take notes when I spoke a bit about the coronavirus, and I understand one of our first graders, Brooklyn, ran and got a pen and paper and took 2 pages of notes. And so it reminded me that some of our younger folks are joining us for our service today too, and I thought that I would do a children's story, a children's puppet story for you this morning. And I brought 2 puppets that are kind of special for a lot of reasons. This is a little mouse puppet, and this is an eagle puppet. And these are really the first puppets that I bought for the purpose of telling children's stories. Maybe I shouldn't say bought, maybe that found me. And it was a couple of characters I wanted for a story that a friend of mine inspired me to write. And I've told the story off and on over the years, and it was the first children's story that I told at this church almost 9 years ago. Or actually, probably 9 years ago, right around this time. So I'm going to get them ready for their performance and be right back. So this is a story called The Eagle and the Mouse, or The Mouse and the Eagle. And I never quite know how to start, whether it's once upon a time there was an eagle or once upon a time there was a mouse, because it really doesn't matter which way to start. So today I think I'll start with the eagle. So once upon a time there was a mighty eagle soaring high above the forest. And the eagle looked down and saw a little mouse, and the little mouse was busy nibbling away at a giant log that had fallen across her path. The eagle became curious and flew down beside the mouse, and the mouse was so busy nibbling away that at first she didn't notice the eagle until its shadow came over her, and then she turned with a start. "Don't worry, little mouse. I'm not going to eat you," said the eagle. "I just ate a trout from the stream of life. Besides, you're too small to even make a healthy snack." "Oh, goodness, thank you so much." "Well, if you're not going to eat me," said the mouse, "I suppose I should get back to nibbling through this log." And away she started nibbling again. "Yes, I can see that," said the eagle. "That's what I'm curious about. Why are you nibbling through that log?" "Why am I nibbling through the log?" said the mouse. "Why, I'm nibbling through the log because, well, actually I've been so concentrated on nibbling through the log that I've forgotten why. Oh, yes, I remember now. I'm nibbling through the log to get to the other side." "Well, of course you're nibbling to get to the other side," said the eagle. "I can see that. I can see everything. I have great eagle vision. I can see all the way to the edge of forever plus 1 day." "Oh," said the mouse, "well, then can you tell me what's on the other side of the log?" "Well, of course I could tell you what's on the other side of the log," said the eagle. "But how do you know there's not a great cliff you might fall off, or a hungry animal waiting to eat you, or another log even bigger than the one you're nibbling through now?" "Oh, I'm afraid I've been so concentrated on getting through the log," said the mouse, "that I didn't think about those things. Please tell me what's on the other side of the log. Please, 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 please." "Well, on the other side of the log is the path to Thunder Mountain, where you will visit Great Spirit's lodge." Oh, yes," said the mouse. "Yes, I remember now. That's why I'm nibbling through this log. Thank you so much for reminding me of my purpose and the meaning of my journey. Well, I should probably get back to work. Are you also traveling to Great Spirit's lodge?" "Me? No," said the eagle. "Why, I told you I have great eagle vision. I can see all the way to the edge of forever plus 1 day. I can see how far the journey is. It is far too long. I wouldn't know where to begin. That's why I just spend my time flying in circles all day." "Oh," said the mouse. And she thought for a minute as she scratched her ears, which she was sometimes prone to doing when she was thinking, and sometimes just because they itched. And then she said, "Tell me, Eagle, with your great vision, can you also tell me how far I've already come?" "Why, of course," said the eagle. "I have great eagle vision. I can see all the way back to the first day plus the day before." "Oh, then do tell me, how far have I come?" The eagle looked with its great vision and said, "Why, you're making good progress. I'd say you're already halfway along your journey." Said the mouse. "So I've already made it halfway through the journey without even knowing where I'm going. I have an idea. Perhaps you can hover above me, reminding me of the purpose of my journey and where I'm going, and I will nibble through the obstacles along the way, and together we might arrive at Great Spirit's Lodge at the foot of Thunder Mountain." "Why, that's a marvelous idea," said the eagle. And from that day forward, the eagle, with its great farsightedness, and the mouse, with its great nearsightedness, traveled together along the journey to Great Spirit's Lodge at the foot of Thunder Mountain. Thank you both. Of course. Of course. Are you coming to Thunder Mountain? I'm on my way. Also, take us into a moment of meditation. Let us open our minds and hearts to the place of quiet, to the silent prayer for the healing of pain and the soft, gentle coming of love. For our reading today, I offer these words from W.E.B. Du Bois. "Now is the accepted time, not tomorrow, not some more convenient season. It is today that our best work can be done, and not some future day or future year. It is today that we fit ourselves for the greater usefulness of tomorrow. Today is the seed time. Now are the hours of work, and tomorrow comes the harvest and the playtime. My sermon today is entitled, Phoenix Rising. Don't miss the opportunity for something greater. I'm guessing that most are familiar with the phoenix motif from Greek mythology. A new phoenix is reborn from the ashes of its predecessor. It probably originated as a solar myth depicting the return of summer and longer days, akin to the Greek gods Attis and Dionysus, the Egyptian god Horus, the Persian god Mithra, the Hindu god Krishna, and the Roman god Christ, all said to have returned to life near the winter solstice. But the phoenix has become as much a symbol representing hope and transformation. It suggests the possibility that we can emerge from the worst periods in our lives triumphant if we're willing to let them change us into something new. We see this happening in real life through the transformation of a worm into a butterfly. I especially appreciate the monarch butterfly's transformation. After passing through several larval stages called instars, those long, skinny bugs hang from a milkweed leaf and seemingly dies as its corpse slowly turns into this emerald-colored sac adorned with a row of 3 golden dots. It looks much more like an expensive piece of jewelry than those encrusted cocoons of most other butterfly species. What's amazing is that within that beautiful jeweled sac, all that was once the living creature has become liquid, amounting to no more than what would be a few drops of water. Yet within those small drops, the creature's DNA is completely reordering itself to become something entirely new. If we could see this extraordinary metamorphosis, if we couldn't see this extraordinary metamorphosis happen right before us, who could ever believe that such a being could come into being? It would be like something made up in a Harry Potter book, some creature made up in a Harry Potter book. So the monarch that emerges from that chrysalis is a real-life phoenix. Now, let me tell you the stories of 4 other real-life phoenixes. One, a child refugee among the thousands of boat people who made desperate and dangerous attempts to flee their country after the end of the Vietnam War by crowding into whatever small seafaring vessels they could. One, a quadriplegic man who lost the use of his limbs at age 18 after being shot during a carjacking. One, a record-breaking Formula One race car driver. And one, a leading brain researcher and successful entrepreneur that Forbes has called one of the top 50 names you need to know. In case you haven't already guessed, these aren't really 4 different people. I'm speaking of only 2 people who, like the mythical phoenix, saw their former worlds burn and crumble. One who literally fled a country that had been nearly burned to the ground, and the other who lost his ability to move just as his young life was beginning. Neither had any reason to hope that they would survive, let alone go on to flourish, but they did. One became a leading neuroscientist, and the other a famous race car driver. Naturally, we'd conclude it was the refugee who became the race car driver, since she had the full use of her limbs, a necessity for driving. and the quadriplegic who became the neuroscientist and successful entrepreneur since he retained the full use of his mind. But no, it's the other way around. It is the quadriplegic man who emerged from the ashes to drive the race car, and the impoverished little girl who emerged from hers to become one of today's most successful women in the world. It was 1981. 6 years after the fall of Saigon had marked the end of the Vietnam War, Tan Le recounts. I was 4 years old. I huddled with my mother, grandmother, and little sister on the boat, crouching to stay out of sight, as did the other 150-plus people crammed on board. If captured, they would spend the rest of their lives in a Vietnamese prison camp. If not, there was also the likelihoods of engine failure and lingering to death at sea, or drowning in the midst of a storm, or being overtaken by pirates who would do unspeakable things before killing everyone. Like most of the grown-ups on the journey, Lee says, my mother had tucked away a small vial of poison. She and my grandmother had made a pact. If we were captured by pirates, my sister and I would drink the vial first, then they would swallow the last drops. Her father stayed behind to be there for them in case they were forced to return, intending to make the treacherous journey himself later on. But he was captured before he could and spent many years in prison, broken, suicidal, and not knowing what had happened to his family. Tan Le says their boat had been encircled by pirates several times, but they were lucky to be aboard a tugboat with a steel hull that made them wary of trying to overtake it without damaging their own vessels. Eventually, the engine did fail, however, and they ran out of food and water for several days before being spotted by a British oil tanker. But its crew wasn't allowed to rescue them unless their ship was sinking, and they sent a distress signal. So they sank it and put out an SOS. After 9 months in a Malaysian detention center, Lee and her family landed in Australia, where she would grow up. In school, she became a brilliant and celebrated student, while at home she shared a bed with her mother and sister. Her mother wanted Tan to use her great mind to become a successful doctor or lawyer, but she was called in another direction. My main motivation had always been, and still is, she says, to make my life meaningful, to make a positive impact by creating something that didn't exist before that would improve the state of the world. Because of her particular interest, she would find her purpose in the area of brain science and technology. Sometime later, Tan Le was at a Young Global Leaders Summit in Buenos Aires, where she noticed a gregarious man in a wheelchair. When she heard who he was, she had to meet him. Rodrigo Huber Mendez accomplished something nobody else ever achieved when taking off in his Formula One race car on a Brazilian speedway in 2017. The quadriplegic daredevil controlled the car with his mind. When he got the okay, he accelerated, roaring down the track. As he came upon the first tight curve, a thought flashed through his mind. This is it, the moment of truth. Could he maintain control of the car? It wasn't smooth, but he managed to bank around the hairpin turn without crashing. Exhilarated, he continued around the course, completing 3 laps before passing the finish line as a checkered flag waved him in. At age 45, Mendez made history by using his mind to drive a race car that had no steering wheel or pedals. He did so with his EEG technology that allowed him to control the car with his brain waves by thinking about it turning and speeding and slowing. Tan Lee caught up with him at the valet station just as he was about to leave the summit. I ran up to him and told him I was curious about the mind-control helmet he'd worn, Lee says. He took one look at my name tag and shouted my name with an exuberant grin. It turns out the device he'd used was developed by Emotive, Tan Lee's own company. Inspired by Star Wars as a child, Tan Lee wanted to invent a helmet or headset that can enable us to control machines like starfighters with our minds. She wanted to give us the ability to use the Force. And that's exactly what she did for her fellow Phoenix, Rodrigo Mendez. When I learned that Phoenix is also the root of Phoenician and means those who work with red dyes, explaining the mythical bird's brilliant purple and red coloring, it reminded me of another real-life phoenix. Around 300 BCE, Zeno of Citium, who was literally a Phoenician who made a fortune working in the expensive dye industry or trade, was transporting his precious cargo of fermenting shellfish across the Mediterranean Sea. They were used for making the imperial royal dye that colored the clothes, exclusively the clothes of kings and emperors. It would take thousands of these unfortunate creatures just to harvest a few ounces of the dye, which is why it was so valuable. But Zeno was caught in a violent storm, resulting in the loss of everything but his life. Shipwrecked in Athens, a homeless and destitute foreigner, Zeno went seeking advice from the oracle of Delphi. Speaking through the high priestess at the temple of Apollo, the oracle told Zeno, "Take on the color not of dead shellfish, but of dead men." Not understanding its meaning and feeling more hopeless than ever, he made the long trek back to Athens, where, nearly exhausted, he stopped to rest at a bookshop. There he began reading Socrates and was profoundly moved by his transforming words. Perhaps it was at this moment that Zeno suddenly realized what the oracle meant, author Donald Robertson writes. He was to take on the color of dead men by thoroughly absorbing the teaching of wise men from previous generations. "Where can I find a philosopher?" Zeno asked. And in that moment, as legend has it, Crates the cynic was passing by. "Follow yonder man," the shopkeeper said. Zeno did, and he became Crates' student. Eventually, he began teaching his own philosophy, and he and his students, the Zenonians as they were called, met at Athens' Stoa Poikile, the painted porch, which is where they got the nickname that we still call them by today, Stoics. And I won't go into Stoicism here, but it remains among the most popular and enduring of the ancient Greek philosophical traditions. So here we have three real-life examples of individuals who experienced the kind of tragedies that could have ruined their entire lives. One lost her country, another his health, and yet another his wealth. Yet they emerged from these ruins to achieve extraordinary heights. And that's the lesson of the Phoenix. That when all seems lost, when the old ways suddenly crumble and no longer work for us, then something new and extraordinary can begin. But the nuanced point that's not to be missed is that phoenixes don't emerge restored. What they were remains gone. What they lost is lost forever and has to be let go of. Lee did not regain her country. Mendez did not regain the use of his body. Zeno did not regain his fortune. They succeeded rather in brand new ways. The rising phoenix isn't about going backward. It's not about restoring what is past, but about moving forward and being transformed by the losses and injuries, poverty, chrysalis, ruins, and ashes of our lives. Today, our entire society, if not the whole world, is a phoenix moment in history. COVID-19 has shown us how vulnerable we are, how fragile our health and our lives, as well as our livelihoods and economies are. And right now, many of us are wondering how long it's going to be for things to get back to normal. But going back to normal would only add tragedy to tragedy. The old phoenix requires us to be transformed for the better by its sacrifice, not to return to our same old ways. The phoenix rising is a moment of simultaneous disruption and opportunity to birth something new. The problem for us is that the old dying phoenix is ancient. That's how old it is. In most legends, it lives to be 500 years old, which means it represents habits that are extremely hard to break. Whole epochs, whole eras. White supremacy is such a phoenix. It's been around a long time. So long that even if most of us don't believe in it anymore, it's seeped into our institutions, into our way of life. That's because we don't know how to let it die. We end slavery, and instead of moving on, we only replace it with Jim Crow segregation. We end Jim Crow segregation only to replace it with mass incarceration. Instead of letting that old bird perish, we put it on life support even though its time has passed. We've got to let this phoenix die so that we can rise above it. I think about the economic recession that hit just as Barack Obama took office in 2008. That was another dying phoenix that didn't need life support. But instead of seizing the opportunity to truly transform our economy, Obama only revived it. He didn't break up the banking industry so that it would never be too big to fail us again. His Department of Justice never made one arrest or prosecution of a senior Wall Street banker for participating in widespread systemic fraud. And he put the same Wall Street insiders who'd been in charge when the collapse happened, Larry Summers, Timothy Geithner, and Ben Bernanke, back in charge of the National Economic Council, the Treasury, and the Federal Reserve. His effort, to his credit, may have temporarily revived that ruinous economy, but it did not transform it, which left most of us just as vulnerable as we had been before. As we see today, it did not prevent us from being just another economic disaster away from another collapse. The 2008 economic collapse was another opportunity to rise above an economy that already left a wide chasm between the haves and the have-nots. But we couldn't let that old bird living in an inflated bubble die when its oxygen ran out. There are so many missed phoenix moments in human history. Remember what we called World War I? The war to end all wars? Or what we said after World War II and the Nazi Holocaust, never again? Yet we've had numerous wars and genocides since then because we can't let the old, past its use, warbird go either. Remember 9/11? When we were told the whole world had changed? People around the globe stood with Americans in those first moments. We are all now Americans now, a French newspaper proclaimed. It was an opportunity for world unity and goodwill that could have brought the entire human community closer. Instead, our leaders told us to keep shopping so the terrorists couldn't win. Then they began 2 endless wars that have cost trillions of dollars, killed millions of civilians, left communities in ruins, traded the global goodwill we had been gifted for global hatred. We even turned on our own allies as soon as they refused to go along with the plan to shift the blame for those attacks onto Iraq, adding insult to injury by renaming French fries and French toast freedom fries and freedom toast. It was another petty, embarrassing, and costly failure to recognize the opportunity to be transformed by the rising phoenix. Racism and oppression, economies that leave too many people out, and warfare have repeatedly left our lives and our communities and our countries in ruin. And we have repeatedly failed to heed the lesson of the rising phoenix by not taking the opportunity to transform all of these devastating habits into something far better, instead of trying to prop up the same old systems out of the dead bird's bones and ashes. Today, COVID-19 has shown us once again how precarious the economy that Obama rescued and Trump likes to take credit for really is. A few people still have most everything, while most of us are one economic disaster away from losing everything. Our income, our homes, and our very lives, if we don't have health care. We're at a phoenix moment in history, an opportunity to commit ourselves to rising above the feelings of the past, the failings of the past, to learn our lessons and move onward and upward by transforming our lives and our world into something better. An economy that doesn't provide for the needs of everyone is a failed economy. A healthcare system that doesn't care for the needs of everyone is a failed healthcare system. A bailout that only bails out the wealthiest industries is a failed bailout. A tax system that isn't equally as taxing for everyone is a failed tax system. Environmental policies that don't protect everyone's environment are failed policies. Politicians who care only for their own voters and constituents are failures. Housing, education, employment systems that don't provide for all of us are failures. They are all dying phoenixes that we need to let die because we need to do the laborious work of birthing something much better. COVID-19, disastrous as it is still an opportunity for us to emerge from the ashes and ruin in a new way. Not the same old ways that will only put us back in the same desperate position in another few years from now. It's not really going to take much to emerge better than we were before COVID-19. Considering the trillions we've already spent on wars for the past 20 years to keep the old oil-driven economy on life support. It's not going to cost us much to provide affordable health care for everyone, not compared to what we're spending to keep the old economy and the healthy wealthy on life support. It's not going to cost us much to reinvent our tax systems compared to the trillions we're now spending to bail out the very industries that haven't been paying their fair share to begin with. If we look closely, the ashes beneath us are parting, and we can see the crown of something new and beautiful, longing to be midwifed into being. Let's not waste the opportunity this time. Let's be like Tan Lee and Rodrigo Mendez and Zeno. Let's become a phoenix rising. Thank you. May you be well, be at peace, be healthy, and be happy. Peace, shalom, salam alaikum,